This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
In Mississippi, a hike in the woods ends in tragedy when 17-year-old Norman Ladner is shot and killed. The local coroner rules the death a suicide. Norman Ladner's parents are convinced that their son was murdered. At a lonely highway rest stop, truck driver Dwayne McCorkindale was brutally gunned down in cold blood for $25. Perhaps you can help find his killers. More than a century ago, a mysterious carpenter arrived at a tiny chapel in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He left behind a wondrous legacy, a magnificent spiral staircase, and vanished. Was he just an itinerant craftsman, or as the nuns believed, God's answer to their prayers? Nylene Marshall disappeared during a picnic 7 years ago. She is now 12, and a man who claims to be holding her has mailed taunting letters to the authorities. Also tonight, a poignant update on our story about a 7-year-old girl who made a solemn vow to a sick friend 21 years ago. Thanks to our viewers, Nikki Crowder has finally fulfilled her promise, and we filmed their joyous reunion. Join me for another edition of Unsolved Mysteries. Norman Charles Ladner of Picayune, Mississippi, was the third child and eldest son in a family of 7. He was a senior in high school, a good student, and a skilled craftsman with his own workshop in the family barn. On August the 21st, 1989, Norman left his parents' country store to go hunting on the family farm. It was a muggy summer day that apparently began like any other.
Norman knew our property very well. It's fenced on all 4 sides, even though it's 122 acres. It has some were pasture land, but about 60 acres and more of timber and woods. So he knew most every foot of it. He'd walked it a number of times.
He loved to fish. He loved to hunt. He loved to be among the wild animals, the squirrels. He would come back so excited when he would see a young deer in the back pasture. It was just his fascination and love of being out there where it was peaceful and quiet.
Norman would always be back by 7 to 7:30 in the afternoon or in the evening, without fail, to help sweep up and mop up the store and restock the coolers. And about 7 o'clock, I began to get worried about him because he was very punctual, and it was the most unusual. You could almost set your clock on him. That's the type of young man he was, very punctual.
Charlotte, Norman's not back yet, and I'm getting a little worried. Yeah, I went down to the barn. He's not there either. Look, bring the dog and meet me at the farm. We'll go look for him.
I helped to some degree in the search, but then I decided that it would be best had I waited at the store for him. Perhaps if he was lost, he could come to the store, or if he was limping from a snake bite or whatever, he would come to the store first. And I felt my place should be there.
Norman! Norman!
felt he was cold, so I knew had been dead for a while. It's a deep shock and a tragedy to come up on and find your own son, because you could never imagine or think how this could happen, or the loss of a child, until you've experienced or gone through it.
Just after 10 p.m., the Pearl River County Sheriff's Department cordoned off the death scene and began an investigation.
Foul play is the first thing that I normally address in the course of an investigation. I ruled it out in this instance because I saw nothing there to indicate that.
The gun was apart like that, right?
Yes, sir.
You notice it's been broken and repaired before.
Yeah. At first I thought it might have been an accident. In viewing the scene, it looked as though he might have been in a tree nearby and subsequently fallen out of the tree and the gun discharged, etc.
After they found him, a deputy came to the store and approached the door. And he looked at me as if trying to find the right words to tell a mother that her son was dead. And I said, "Is he dead?" And he said, "Yes." I can tell you it's the most shattering experience anyone can go through.
We felt that it was an accident. And even when the coroner came back to the store after the results of his examination, he came up with two deputies, and he said he felt that it was 90% sure that it was an accidental shooting.
The case of Norman Ladner became a living nightmare for his parents when the coroner issued his findings. He officially ruled their son's death a suicide caused by a close contact wound in which the bullet had entered at Norman's right temple and exited at his left. Imagine for a moment that you were Norman Ladner's parents. You understand the coroner to say that your son's death is an accident. This is at best difficult to accept, but it becomes nearly impossible to accept when you are told it is not an accident after all. Your son has committed suicide.
It was impossible for it to be a suicide. I knew my son too well. He enjoyed and he lived life to the fullest. He was happy, he was outgoing, he was not depressed in any way. And he had too many things going for him.
The results of that autopsy is what I based my findings as to believing that it was a self-inflicted wound. I think that he went back into an area where he felt comfortable, he enjoyed going, and for reasons that we don't know, that he decided to take his life. We believe the boy was standing when the shot was fired because of his body position in relation to the gun at the scene.
They made no attempt to locate the bullet. They had never fingerprinted the gun. They cannot say with any facts that his gun was the weapon that was used to kill him.
Even with their ruling of suicide, I still believe that it was an accident. And for several weeks, we did nothing about it. Until we started to piece the jigsaw together, then we realized that it was definitely not a suicide. As a matter of fact, it definitely was not an accident.
One particular item in the coroner's report made no sense to the Ladners. The coroner described a 1 1/4 inch long laceration on the very top of Norman's head. If Norman had committed suicide, how would he sustain such a wound? The coroner and the pathologist found this jagged root at the death scene. They say it was spattered with blood and believe the root caused the laceration.
We didn't see how that could happen because falling straight back, you would hit your head on the side or directly in the back, not up in the crown of your head, up in the peak of his head.
Because the authorities had never found the bullet that killed Norman, the Ladners began their own investigation. They dug through the earth in the area where their son had fallen.
I remember so well the feeling that I had of having to sift through the dried particles of brain tissue and blood of my son.
We found a bullet that was longer than the bullet that Norman's gun would hold. The chamber was not bored out for the length of that bullet. And the bullet was intact. It had a slight twist on it and it had a nick on it. And it had blood stain, dried blood, and a hair that we examined under the magnifying glass.
We have no way of knowing where that bullet came from. We don't have any reason to believe that it was the bullet that was fired that caused the boy's death. Mainly because we feel that the boy was standing at the time the gun was fired. And if that being the case, with the direction of travel that the pathologist says the bullet taken, it would not have been in the ground underneath his head.
Finding the bullet indicated that our son was not in a standing position when he was killed. The bullet was retrieved out of the ground, the bullet was embedded about 2 or 2.5 inches in the ground. And we came to the conclusion that he was lying on the ground and he was shot by someone in a standing position.
A state ballistics expert was unable to determine whether the bullet had been fired by Norman's rifle. He returned the bullet to the Ladners, but they say it is not the one they found. 3 weeks after their son's death, the Ladners went to the coroner's office to question his ruling. According to Mrs. Ladner, a stranger interrupted the conversation.
Can I speak to you over here a minute, please?
And as we were a distance away, he said, "Mrs. Ladner, don't open this case up. You have other children. I suggest you raise them for your own good. You'll never find the person that killed your son." And then the man left. My reaction to that statement was that it was a warning that we would experience some type of problems if we would investigate this case. But my feeling on this issue is that this was my son, and I will not back down under any circumstances.
Undaunted, Norman's father returned to the area where his son had died.
Hey, come here.
300 yards away, he found a strange radio-like device that looked homemade.
I suppose that is.
I don't know. It's from up there.
We figured we had a piece of evidence of some sort that we must try to find somebody that knew what it was.
State authorities felt it was not an important clue, but a neighbor suggested he take it to an ex-narcotics agent living in the area.
The former DEA agent said that this was a type of devices that drug dealers used to signal aircraft by sending out a low-range signal for the proper alignment to drop shipment of drugs. Well, that led me to speculate that Norman possibly came upon someone picking up a shipment of drugs on our land. And possibly this was the reason he was murdered, that he would have recognized the person or persons.
I don't think that that's what happened in this case. It's very hard to accept a death, period. It's that much harder to accept a suicide. It's my feeling that if this case was ruled an accidental death today, they would say nothing else about it.
What really happened to young Norman Ladner? Authorities continue to stand by the coroner's ruling. Norman's parents refused to believe that their son could have killed himself.
This stays with you almost constantly, almost 24 hours a day. Every waking hour, you think about this. It's a part of us that's missing, and it's a great deal of strain knowing that he was murdered and nothing has been done to bring his murderers to justice.
We have to proceed. We will not stop this investigation, no matter what, until it is finished. We owe it to our son, and we owe it to our children, we owe it to ourselves, and we owe it to the other people's children out there as well. We want to know what happened to our son.
In 1969, 7-year-old Nikki Crowder was hospitalized in Los Angeles, California to have several tumors removed from her throat. There she met 8-year-old Sharita Lynn Harding. Sharita had a rare and dangerous form of cancer.
I like your flowers.
I looked up to Sharita because, one, she was older, and she was there first. So she kind of initiated me of what, being in a new place, new atmosphere.
Let's have a race.
In the days that followed, a warm and caring friendship blossomed between the two girls.
There was a bond there because we mattered to one another. We looked out for what went on, and we had something in common, and that was our illnesses itself.
Hi.
A few weeks after they met, Sharita underwent several hours of grueling surgery.
Mommy, is this going to happen to me?
No, honey, this isn't going to happen to you. She has a different type of operation than you're going to have.
So that's when my mother explained to me that Sharita had a very, very delicate surgery and that she wouldn't be able to have kids. And I remember feeling like, oh, that, was just the worst thing in the world.
That night, Nikki did her best to comfort her friend.
I'm sorry you're feeling so bad. Does it hurt?
I said, you don't have to cry because if I ever have a baby, I said, you can share it with me and we can both be its mommy. I said, and I'll even name it Sharita after you.
Don't worry.
5 weeks later, Nikki was released from the hospital.
We can share.
The two friends never saw each other again. Today, Nikki is the mother of a beautiful 3-year-old girl. She wants to christen her daughter Sharita and keep the promise she made in 1969.
I promise. I'll name her after you.
A few minutes after Nikki's story aired, we learned that Sharita Lynn Harding was alive and well and living in Oklahoma. We immediately contacted Nikki with the good news. Just 10 days after our broadcast, and more than 21 years after they said goodbye, Sharita Lynn Harding and Nikki Crowder were finally reunited at Nikki's home in Los Angeles.
Oh my God. I can't believe it.
A long time.
20 years.
I'm so glad to see you. I'm so glad you're alive.
I don't think
Nikki has changed that much. She was always caring, giving person. It seems like she's still the same. She would have to be to try to find me in all these years and be so persistent about it.
Father, in the name of Jesus, watch up over this child, protect her all of the days of her life. Keep her from
On October 20th, 1990, Nikki Crowder was finally able to fulfill her promise.
A child is it's a gift you can't buy. It's the most perfect gift in the world, and it comes from God. And nobody should be deprived of that, whether they have it naturally or can share it with somebody, And that's something that I wanted to share with Sharita. Because of all the joy and strength she gave me, I could give her back something that she missed.
Lord, bless them even as godparents. Cause your spirit to rest upon them.
Being a godmother is special to me because I don't have any kids, and this is giving me like a child of my own that I, can share. I'm just honored, so I'll try to live up to it as best as I can.
I'm very happy that I found Sharita. And now I can go on, and I can go on a positive note because she's alive. And I just like to say thanks to everybody.
I christened thee, Sharita Kennedy Crowder.
November 12, 1988, Chandler, Oklahoma. An anonymous caller reported seeing the body of a man lying beside a phone booth at a highway rest stop. At approximately 8 p.m., the Oklahoma Highway Patrol arrived on the scene. The man had been murdered. Coins were scattered about his body. The dead man was Dwayne McCorkindale, a 27-year-old truck driver and father of twin girls from Kansas City, Kansas. He had been killed by a single shotgun blast, fired at close range into his back. The apparent motive, robbery.
If Dwayne had been killed in an accident, I could have stood it a lot better. It seems so ironic that he was killed for money, when the last thing a trucker will do is carry very much for that very reason.
Boston to Bakersfield, San Antonio to Seattle. Every day, thousands of big rigs travel the highways and back roads of America. Though they come from many walks of life, truckers have one thing in common.
Yeah, it's double whammy. Headed back to Kansas City. Come on back.
CB radios, their lifeline to the rest of the world.
Wife and the 2 baby girls waiting for me back there.
But for Dwayne McCorkindale, an idle conversation over the airwaves may have signed his death warrant. Dwayne's final run began like any other. On November 10th, 1988, he left Detroit, Michigan en route to Oklahoma City.
McCorkindale made a regular run bringing parts to an Oklahoma City automobile plant. We have no reason to believe anything was different that night. He enters the turnpike, he's given a ticket with the time on it, and through that ticket we're able to determine that he made no other stops. He drove directly from the turnpike gate to the rest area.
Other truckers reported that at approximately 5:45 p.m., Dwayne McCorkindale told them he was stopping at the Chandler rest stop to call his wife.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull over here at this rest area and call the wife. See how things back at home. We'll catch you on the other side. We'll see you later. It's double whammy. We gone. Bye-bye.
We theorized that someone had been listening to him on the CB and actually followed him into that rest area, or perhaps was already there waiting for him. It looked like he was walking up to the telephone, perhaps counting change out in his hand, since there was change there at the base of the phone booth, and was killed as he stepped up to make the call. whoever was involved in this, killed McCorkindale, just shot him in the back, and he was dead before he hit the ground. It killed him instantly. Then checked him to see if he had any money on him, any valuables at all. So people like that are, to us, scary, because those type of people, in our minds, are very likely to do it again. And that's why we've placed so much emphasis on this case.
What we got, Tom?
Investigators determined that the only items missing were Dwayne's keys and his wallet. They estimate that the killer's take was no more than $25.
Being killed for that little money seems ridiculous, especially when I know that if they had come up to him in any threatening manner, he would have handed it over.
Early on in the investigation, I hate to say we were at a dead end, but our leads were thin. They were very thin. One of the things that the agent started doing is he started putting notices in the trucker magazines across the United States, and the calls started coming in.
Within days, investigators received reports about a brown Ford Pinto equipped with a CB radio. Several truckers told of a dangerous game of cat and mouse.
At the time of the McCorkindale death, we have reports that the Pinto was driving very erratically on the highway, trying to cut 18-wheelers off.
Hey, man, what do you think you're doing? Trying to get somebody hurt out there?
Well, you don't know who you're messing with, good buddy. We'll drive anywhere we want.
Hey, man, ain't no way. Billy, come on now, behave out here. You're gonna get somebody hurt.
So, we've already killed one trucker, and we'll kill another if you stay in our way.
And when the truck driver would call them on the CB, they were abusive. They said that, leave us alone or we'll do to you what we did to this other trucker.
3 weeks later, authorities received a call from trucker Ed Heitkamp. He was breaking for lunch at a rest stop when he was approached by a young woman who was acting strangely.
Hey there, how you doing?
All right.
Listen, you got any dope you can let us have?
No,
Really
I
need
don't.
something.
She was, well, I hate to say it, but she looked kind of trashy. I mean, it looked like she had been on something, and she was just awful shaky.
Well, me and my crew, we've been down in Texas visiting some friends. We're trying to get back to Alabama. Can you help us find the road to get there?
I kind of turned to reach to get a map, and next thing, she's got her whole front half inside the truck.
We just need a few bucks. I really need something bad.
Well, then she started asking if I could, if I could spare some money.
My friend,
She needed to fix awful bad. I said I wasn't about to give her none for that.
Look, can you...
And about that time, this brown Pinto pulled up, and then she jumped down off the truck and headed for the car, and they took off.
The next day, just 13 miles south on the same highway, Dwayne McCorkindale was gunned down.
After I read that article, I thought maybe I'm lucky that I didn't get out of the truck. Otherwise, I might have been the one that would have got shot, because they was desperate.
While we have no way of knowing if the Pinto was actually involved in this or not, it is without a doubt our strongest lead, and we have got to locate the Pinto and ultimately the people to talk to them to see if nothing else, we can eliminate them from this situation.
Dwayne McCorkindale was murdered doing the thing he loved best. But for him, the freedom of the road ended in one senseless and violent split second.
Having the twins grow up, knowing their father only from pictures, has been hard because they see other little girls and boys with their daddies. And they've asked where their daddy is. And we've had to tell them that their daddy's in heaven with Jesus. Later on, I'm going to have to find a way to tell them what somebody did to them.
When we return, the legend of the Miracle Staircase in Santa Fe, New Mexico. No one knows who built this mysterious and ethereal structure. Santa Fe, New Mexico is a city rich in the tradition and lore of the Old West. A century and a half ago, it was the last outpost along the Santa Fe Trail, a bustling, untamed haven for outlaws, gamblers, mavericks, and renegades. In 1852, the Sisters of Loretto, a religious order in Kentucky dispatched 7 nuns to bring religion and education to the frontier. It was a journey fraught with danger, harsh weather, hostile Indians, and disease.
When they were on their way, they were attacked by cholera. One of the sisters died, and one had to return because she was too ill to travel. So 5 sisters continued the trip to the west.
This is an A.
Once in Santa Fe, the sisters established a school and began making plans to build a chapel. Finally, in April of 1878, the sisters celebrated the completion of the Chapel of Our Lady of Light. It still stands today. More than 20 French and Italian stonemasons spent 5 years constructing the magnificent Gothic chapel.
Our chapel is so splendid, but how shall we get to
The sisters were delighted except for one minor detail. There was no staircase leading to the choir loft. The sisters finally had their chapel, but no means of ascending to the music chamber.
Many of the lofts of churches, early churches in New Mexico, had no staircases. They simply leaned a ladder up and climbed the ladder and sang. But the sisters couldn't climb a ladder in their long robes, so they needed a staircase.
A conventional stairway was not feasible, as it would require the removal of too many seats.
Some carpenters had come in and looked the situation over, but shook their heads in dismay and said there was just no way. And so they decided that they would not do anything until they made a novena to St. Joseph, the patron of carpenters.
Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom
A novena requires 9 days of meditation and regular prayer.
As it is in heaven. Give us this
For 8
day
days, the sisters
our daily
prayed.
bread,
Nothing happened.
and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us.
On the 9th and final day of the novena, a stranger arrived at the chapel.
Come in, sir.
Mother Superior, I'm seeking work.
And what is your trade, sir?
I'm a carpenter.
We do have need of a stairway to be built in our chapel, but it's a
The sisters let the stranger attempt what so many had said was impossible. They were hopeful their prayers had been answered. If the carpenter had a name, it has long since been forgotten. According to the legend, he carried only 3 tools: a hammer, a saw, and a T-square. Some say he worked for 6 months, others say it was more. When he was finished, he called the nuns together. "You have your staircase," he announced. Then he left, without being paid, and was never heard from again.
The carpenter obviously had to be a very fine carpenter. He had to be a master carpenter to build the staircase that was built. Because you see, there's no center support. This is what makes that staircase so extraordinary. There is no center post. It rests by its own geometric balance and design. It's very steep, 22 feet, going around and around, because it makes 2 360-degree turns. And once again, with no center post, there's a certain springiness when you walk up it, and you realize you're climbing a very, very special staircase.
Sisters, I've counted the stairs. There's 33. The exact number of years our Lord Jesus Christ was on this earth.
I never fail to count those steps whenever I go up or come down, and it's still 33.
The sisters planned a feast for the carpenter. When he failed to appear, they searched the town. The mysterious stranger was missing.
You seen him around town?
Nobody had seen him.
Thank you very much.
Nobody knew where he slept. Nobody ever fed him. They made a novena to St. Joseph, the patron of carpenters. So it's understandable that they would believe St. Joseph did it.
So far as anyone knows, the carpenter never returned to Santa Fe. The chapel is now a tourist attraction. Through the years, the mystery surrounding the staircase persisted. Then in 1965, Oscar Hadwiger, a third-generation master carpenter, visited the chapel.
He went in and he saw the staircase, and of course he was overwhelmed. Being a builder, any builder is overwhelmed when they see this magnificent piece of carpentry. And he remembered a story in the family that his grandfather had come to this country and had built a staircase.
Oscar's grandfather, Johann Hadwiger, was a renowned European carpenter who spent 2 years traveling and working in Colorado and New Mexico. It was during that 2-year period that the spiral staircase was built. Oscar Hadwiger became obsessed with the staircase. Over the next 10 years, he created 10 perfectly scaled models. He sent a letter to the sisters contending that his grandfather had been the builder. The sisters were skeptical.
The sisters are indeed surprised, shocked at his claim all of a sudden. And they tell him that perhaps he can't prove this claim, and that if he can't prove it, it might be fraudulent.
They have nothing except their word of mouth that he did it. So I really I don't buy it.
In 1970, Oscar Hadwiger found what he felt was proof. In a storage room in his sister's home, he came across his grandfather's toolbox. Inside was a faded sketch of a spiral staircase. The drawing was an overhead view with 33 steps. Oscar Hadwiger passed away in 1980. The sketch was never authenticated and has since disappeared. All that exists today is this photocopy of the drawing. As for Johann Hadwiger's tools, they too have disappeared. Who was a stranger who answered the sisters' prayers? Was it Johann Hadwiger, the European builder? Or could it have been, as the sisters of Loretto believed 100 years ago, a messenger of God on a sacred mission? Next, a family's desperate search for their missing daughter, and a man who claims he will never return her. In 1983, 4-year-old Nylene K. Marshall disappeared while picnicking with family and friends near her home in Montana. For over 7 years, Nylene's family has been trapped by the agony of not knowing what happened to her. Nylene's story is all too familiar. Every year, thousands of children in the United States disappear, and tragically, many of them are never found. With your help, Nylene's case may have a different ending. 2.5 years after she disappeared, authorities received this letter from an anonymous man who claims he has Nylene. He writes, "She's a sweet little girl. I realize how much her family must miss her. I love her and I have her. I just can't let her go. Please watch carefully. You may know the man who wrote this letter. You may even know Nylene K. Marshall." June 25th, 1983, Helena, Montana. A group of local families were enjoying a picnic in a remote wooded area. Less than 100 yards away, Nylene and several other children were playing on the banks of a shallow creek. At around 4 p.m., Nylene vanished. For 10 days, more than 2,800 searchers combed the area.
The dogs were unsuccessful. The grid search was unsuccessful. There was just absolutely nothing to indicate if she was even there.
Authorities were baffled. Then Nylene's mother learned of a chilling possibility. Some of the children playing near Nylene told her they remembered seeing a strange man dressed in a jogging suit.
2 little girls had walked by Nylene while she was sitting there, and a man stepped out from behind the trees. And the first little girl didn't recognize him as part of the group, and Nylene was heard by her saying, "My brother can run faster than you." And she was still sitting there with her little legs crossed. A second child, an 8-year-old girl, came by, and saw the man, and the man took a step closer to Nylene.
Have you ever played Follow the Shadow?
What?
Follow the Shadow. It's a new
One of the little boys, a 6-year-old, said that Nylene had told him the man had told her to follow the shadow, and they haven't been seen since.
Convinced that Nylene was abducted, Nancy Marshall and her husband Kim distributed thousands of missing posters across the United States. They received dozens of reported sightings, but none could be confirmed. Then on November 27, 1985, the case of Nylene K. Marshall took a dramatic turn. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children received an anonymous phone call from a man who claimed he had Nylene. 2 months later, an organization called Child Find of America received a typewritten letter from the same man. In the letter, the man claimed that he was raising Nylene, that he loved her and had no intention of returning her to her parents.
This man said he was taking good care of her, but during the same phone conversation or same letter that he would write would also make reference to things that he was having Nylene do, which would be sexual abuse.
Yeah, she's with me out in the car here.
Over the next 6 months, Child Find of America received 2 more letters and another 2 phone calls.
These phone calls were coming from the Madison, Wisconsin area, as were letters that he was sending. The FBI, to my understanding, had actually located the phone booth that the phone calls were coming from. Coincidentally, after locating the phone booth, however, the phone calls abruptly stopped.
In his letters, the man reveals a few clues that might help find Nylene. He claims that he lives off substantial investments and that he and Nylene travel frequently.
I teach her at home, and she likes to go with me when I travel. She would gladly recount to you trips to San Francisco, New York, Oklahoma City, New Orleans, Nashville, Chicago, Puerto Rico, or Canada. We were even in Britain for a month last year, and she loved it. Nobody questions passports.
There were numerous leads about Nylene's sightings all over the United States. Well, that ties in. If he is in fact traveling, that would account for the sightings from one coast to another coast.
Just last June, authorities received another possible lead in the case. Nylene Marshall's uncle saw this composite of a man and woman wanted for child abduction in another part of the country. He believes he saw them during the first day of the search for Nylene.
It's not really all that unusual for a person to remain at the scene of a crime, get lost in a crowd, and stick around to see what was going to happen next.
I still look for her. I always will. Every time I'm at an airport, every time I'm at a resort, every time I'm at an amusement park. Sure, I look like I'm having a good time, but I'm looking for my child every minute that I'm out.
Today, Nylene K. Marshall would be 12 years old. This is a computer-aged photograph of what she may look like. At the time of her disappearance, she had dark brown hair and blue eyes. Once again, the anonymous man placed the phone calls from a phone booth in Madison, Wisconsin. He states that he now calls Nylene by her middle name, Kay. In his letters, he mentions that his parents and younger sister were killed in a car accident when his sister was 9 years old. Next week on Unsolved Mysteries, in Aurora, Missouri, a prominent citizen is burned to death in her own home. A young retarded man named Johnny Wilson confesses to the crime, but later recants. 2 years later, the case takes a bizarre twist when another man confesses to the murder and says Johnny is innocent. But Johnny Lee Wilson is still behind bars. 2 men in a bar fight over a woman in Edmore, North Dakota. The next day, one of the combatants, Kenneth Engie, is found dead in his garage. An accident or murder. Join me next week. Perhaps you can help solve a mystery.